Hi, I'm Chris Frostad, the president and CEO of Purepoint Uranium Group. We're an exploration company operating in northern Saskatchewan in the Athabasca Basin, and we have 12 active projects right now where we are working quite aggressively, particularly over the next coming year.
Brilliant, Chris. Good to see you again. I'm seeing this is the end of August, beginning of September, I think. What a wild ride!
It was a year. It was a year, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking more particularly towards the end, obviously, with Sprott's Physical Uranium Trust kicking into action, and then going a little bit quiet towards Christmas. I think people were expecting it to be shooting to the moon, I think the phrase is.
Yeah, to keep going. I mean, we've always referred to it as a tipping point. When it started to move, it would keep going. And I think the markets were sort of anticipating that because the long-term price that we haven't seen move beyond $32 for nearly 5 years, all of a sudden September jumped up to $40. And I think ourselves, like a lot of people, thought, here we go. But for the most part, we haven't seen those prices move. They plateaued at that point and carried on for the rest of the year at that level. And although I think a lot of the equities kept riding high, at some point, the equity market realized that wait a minute, it's kind of stalled for a bit, and we better take a beat. So we saw, yes, as you said, we saw a lot of the equities sort of come off through November and December.
Yeah, it's been. I think uranium has been for the last 2.5 years, certainly for us, an emotional ride in the sense that there's always a catalyst, there's always someone else's responsibility to kind of drive the price. And I think we had John Giampaglia on our private investment platform, just talking about it. And I think even he's saying, well, the obvious thing is I need people to invest in us to allow us to release the capital to go and buy these pounds. And I think they just bought £1 million today, which is obviously good news indeed. But there's something else that's happened in the market, which has really driven a little bit of excitement. And that's Kazakhstan. What's your take on what's going on over there?
Oh, well, sure. Well, certainly political risk is always a consideration in resource investing, unlike most other investments. You don't have, because most of us, most of the mining opportunities you'd be investing in are actually have assets in other jurisdictions. So it is a big issue. What's happened in Kazakhstan, we really have to wait and see. Certainly, Kazatomprom has mentioned that it hasn't disrupted things at all. Cameco has somewhat allude to the same, but again, they say we kind of have to wait and see. It's certainly not the first time we've seen that in the uranium space. Even in 2010, there was a military coup in Niger that kind of stopped everything over there for a bit. And at the time, I think they were the third or fourth largest producer of uranium. So all of a sudden, the military marches in and says we're going to reevaluate all of our uranium and gold agreements, and things happen. And, that's been smoothed out since. It was 10, 12 years ago, but it's certainly, an aspect of the industry we live in.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how the Kazakh story pans out the next few days and weeks. It's hard to imagine an ISR project stopping because that flow's got to flow somewhere. So we shall see if it's affected production. I guess over the next few weeks or so. Look, I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about the macro stuff with you. I want to talk about your take on last year for you guys. You seem to have followed the trend, which whatever's happening in the market, you followed it, and that's not a bad thing to say in the sense that if you're not in the game, you're not in the game, and you've managed to stay in the game here. Should we just quickly remind any newbies about your Hook Lake and Smart Lake project JVs there? So just quickly.
Well, sure. We drilled that project last winter, as we spoke about. This year we're moving our efforts towards a different area of that project, and we put out a video and we put out information and news on it. Because of what we've seen and learned over the last 10 years, and particularly a lot of the research that came out of the Canadian Geological Survey, we're really understanding that whole region in a very different way and seeing where a lot of this uranium was sourced from and how it moved and how the mineralization occurred. So we're kind of looking in a bit of a different direction, and our partners have want to make sure that we go out and we're doing geophysics first before we start drilling again, because it is just off the Patterson. It's to the west of Patterson. There's another corridor referred to as the Carter Corridor. It's actually closer to the heat source that we now understand was mobilizing uranium back in the day, and it was one of the first places we drilled 10 years ago, and found mineralization back in that one drill program. But immediately after that was when things really lit up on Patterson, and we moved our efforts over there. So it's a new angle on Hook we're taking right now. We're not going to be doing probably any drilling this year. We'll see what happens later in the year. But as with always with our partners, they want to make sure that we've done our homework before we start poking a drill in the ground.
Yeah, but they don't have the same financial pressures that you do, whether that be in terms of share price performance or cash at hand. So, are they moving at the pace you need them to or expected them to?
I think we would have liked to be out there sooner, because we're kind of in different places. Again, they're working with it in a different time frame. They deal in 5-10 year increments, and we're dealing in 1 month to month. So when this has happened historically as well, we'll wind up in a year where actually money is available to us. We would like to put more money into that project or those projects. There's also a Smart Lake project that we JV, and it happens to be a year when they're conserving their efforts, or they're moving their focus in other areas. So, that we're still, if there's a competition internally, it's with the East, because their focus is more on finding more feed for their mills that they're going to need in 10 years, as opposed to coming up with some net new something on the other end. So there is a bit of trade-off there, but it comes and goes. And by and large, we've never had huge disagreements as to what, where, and how much we should be spending.
Right. I think this is always an interesting conversation when juniors talk to me about, we've got a major involved and they're a JV partner and they put X millions of dollars towards this over the next 5-8 years, whatever. It's and then they come back with tails between the leg, within 12 months going, we didn't find what they wanted us to find, so they've gone, right? But you've got Cameco and Orano as partners on both projects. Well, Cameco and Orano on Hook Lake and Cameco on Smart Lake, but they're still at the table. You're still working with them. They are still financially invested.
Very much so. Very much so. I mean, in many periods over the last 10 years, we've offered actually to do even more work, but they did not want to take the dilution in their equity piece in those projects. I mean, they still remain very, very focused and interested in moving that project along. Right,
but again, coming back to this, I made reference to your share price, tracking and following the ebb and flow of uranium equities across the board. I think your profile looks the same as most of your peers, quite frankly, to me.
For sure. But we've also had to open up in terms of, we only own 21% of that project, and that's enough. But we have a lot of other projects that we need to start developing, and we need to start creating value.
That's what I want to talk to you about. That's what I want to talk to you about today, because, Chris, we had a very frank conversation the first time we ever spoke, and people should go and watch that interview and get a sense of you and the team and how you're approaching this thing. But you can't just sit and, on the coattails of the market in the hope that it might drive your market cap or your share price. You've got to take control. So you've got 10 other projects you're 100% owners of. So what are you focused on? Because again, limited cash, you got to get focused on stuff that's going to drive interest and drive that share price. So what do you do?
Right. Well, again, it's interesting to go, to open up a lot of these projects with 10 years more experience behind us in terms of what we've seen. We've been doing drilling right across the basin from one end to the other. We've been seeing different levels of mineralization, different settings for this stuff, and really have a different understanding of what we're looking at from time to time. Last year was very much, the application of a lot of that learning and going to these projects. We drilled, we just finished up our 5th project drill program. At Henday, we're waiting for the results on that one. But the first 4 we drilled at Hook, we drilled at the Hinge Zone in Red Willow, we drilled at Geneva at Red Willow, and we drilled at Umferville. And we've come back with mineralization on all of those projects and an understanding of where we go next. Umferville was probably the most interesting because we'd never drilled it before. So it was a bit of a fingers crossed as we go up there. And in the first hole, we hit mineralization. So it goes to show that we we know how to vector in and we know how to look for this stuff and find
but
it.
Give me some numbers here. But give me some, you do need to expand on it, because if I don't want people to walk away and think, oh, that was a bit vague. Give me some numbers here, because finding mineralization and people, that's kind of bordering on, oh, it was a technical success. And we know what that is code word for, right? Mm-hmm. So what sort of mineralization were you finding? Is it giving you the sense that these are economic or could become economic discoveries?
Well, of course, I'm going to say yes. No, but maybe the best example is where we're focusing now. We have just started drilling at Red Willow's Osprey zone. All right, and this is the area. Again, we consistently are reprioritizing. Osprey is an area where we have historically seen a lot of mineralization. We're looking at it in a different way now. And when you say how much, well, we found 5-6 meters of 0.19%. 0.2%. This is the type of stuff we've seen there. One hole like that does not, we've hit as high as 3% in some of these holes. That doesn't necessarily mean you've found a deposit. It just means that you've now found something to chase. And what we're focusing on right now, this winter at Osprey, is a zone. It's a lens of mineralization that we've been able to identify that we hope is on the edge of something bigger. And there is. We'll be drilling 20 holes out there and 3,000 meters and expanding on something now that we know is something. It's not just a hole. It's not just a technical success. It's something that we can now expand on and make bigger and determine how big it is.
And what does that mean? Tell me what that means. You've got a hole. You obviously understand that. When you say you expand it and make it bigger, what are you trying to paint a picture of here? Because I just, otherwise you're just drilling 3,000 meters and you're still kind of hoping that,
Sure.
So what's the plan?
I mean, we literally have put 4 holes through something we can now draw a picture of. It's not just a hole with a bunch of spiky things on it. It is, I don't want to call it a deposit because it's not big enough yet to be called a deposit. It's a lens, but it is something that is of size, that we can now move north and south from, or east and west from, and try and or go to depth. This is open in a number of different areas. So depending on what the geological setting is, this thing can go in a couple of different ways. Again, this is a process. One hole doesn't give you a resource. But
it might give you a discovery. If I look at some of your peers, they've drilled one hole and go, "Hey, we've made a discovery here. We're very confident what we've got." And I'm like, one hole equals discovery. It doesn't make sense to me. But that is the language being used out there. So why aren't you more optimistic?
Because it gets picked up by social media and it gets picked up in the press releases. And you will find us, I'm sorry, using those terminology whenever we can without getting crazy about it. But the fact is, this is a process. And I mean, and Spitfire is a good example of that. I can tell you what our first couple of holes at Spitfire looked like, and they were great. They were spectacular, and it turned into something. But at the end of the day, it was only so big, and I'm not allowed to tell you how big it was because we haven't issued a report on it. But it wasn't big enough to be mineable at the time, and particularly for our partners. But once we were able to start to identify that there was extended mineralization, not just a hole, not just a seam or a seep. It was something bigger. Then you start following it in a variety of different directions. You determine how big it actually is. You don't have to, you have to drill something so much in order to be able to issue it as a resource estimate, but you don't have to get anywhere near that to know what is actually there. I mean, we can, in 10 minutes, with the information we've disclosed, you could figure out how much is in Spitfire. You could figure out how much is in the Hurricane or Moore Lake or any of these things where they haven't got a resource estimate yet. And you can either decide to not go for the end game and just keep poking holes in it and putting out good press releases, or you can actually try and turn it into a real mineable asset. And that really is, to your point, what we need to do if we're going to have any longevity in the game. If this is just a matter of, playing the stock market for the next year or two while things are hot, well, that's a way you can go, but that's not the way we chose to go.
But you kind of got to get that balance right. You kind of do need to also play the market while it's hot, because you're going to raise cheaper money as a result, right? You got up as high as 20 cents in the middle of
a
last
moment.
year for a moment, for a brief moment, and you know,
Yeah.
and 16, 17 cents after the Sprott Physical Uranium
Sure.
Trust deal, right? So you do have to play the market, and you do have to be nimble and look
It is
after
a balance.
shareholders by doing what everyone else does, quite frankly.
It has to be a balance. And that's why, this year, as I say, we're going to focus on Red Willow and Osprey, because we know we can deliver results that people can understand. We can start turning this into a picture. We know we can start expanding on something that is there. And, a lot of the work we did last year was really to help us reprioritize that and to figure out where we could drive the most value, not just by coming up with the odd hole with high results, but actually start to paint a picture of something that is growing into a deposit.
Okay, so have you learned any lessons the hard way, or just by being observant last year, about the way that you need to behave this year, not just in terms of the market stuff, in terms of allocation of capital? You're referencing Red Willow and Osprey, obviously, here, but does it make sense to focus on one project with the capital that you've got, so this story is a little bit simpler for people to understand?
That's a balance. It still remains a balance. I mean, I think one of the lessons learned is if you try and over promote one project, it could catch up with you too easily. The odds are it will catch up with you, in the next drill program. So it is a balance, and I think in our case, we want to make sure that we can consistently show and demonstrate that we are delivering results. They may not be the no, I mean, we want to consider, we should be able to deliver results on an ongoing basis, because that's what we're starting with. We're starting from a point where we know where things are, we understand our projects, and we understand where those opportunities are, and we will now be able to really drive value by expanding on that understanding.
Yeah, and look, and I get the balance argument here, because we've seen some of your peers just tackle one project at a time, and it's easy to understand. It either works or it doesn't work. It's fairly binary, right? And we've seen some of your peers who are sitting with 20 plus projects in the portfolio, and people are like, I don't know where to look, right? And that hasn't worked as well for them.
And that is a learning from last year. I would say that absolutely that's a learning that we came away with, is that the market wants to focus on something. They want to talk about one thing, because let's face it, exploration companies aren't so much a business as they are a project, or an accumulation of projects. And so people want that project that they can focus on. And we're going to get focused this year on, like I say, on the Osprey zone and on Turner Lake, which is another one that we found over the last year. There was a lot of interest in that because of its proximity to Hurricane and Laroque and some of the other stuff that's happened in that area. So from a communication standpoint, yeah, I think you do need to get more focused on particular projects. Okay,
so I think we're in violent agreement that uranium is a very hot topic and will continue to be this year. So the supply demand fundamentals, part of that story, starting to become more and more true with, reduced production. We've got, stories being pumped into the market, like what the effect of is going on in Kazakhstan, and how that's going to affect supply. We've seen Sprott moving in and sweeping up, pounds in the market, which is all kind of good stuff. But I also noticed that you did a panel recently, and it was framed as the next generation of uranium producers, right? There's a big category. There's the handful of producers, and then there's everyone else, right? But I'm interested. I think that people should have uranium in their portfolio for sure as investment. I think there's money to be made. Where would you position yourself within that sort of vast category of next generation of uranium producers? Because some are closer than others, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I didn't name that panel.
No.
I think if you look at our peers, if you look at who's doing what you will see is that we are truly looking for a mine. We are not looking for the one great hole that we can press release 4 times. We are looking for a mine, and we have been learning from our partners how to do that. We've been learning what is a mine and what isn't a mine. And we've been also learning that, odds are, that one project isn't going to produce the mine. You need to hedge your bets, and you need to have a lot going on, as much going on as you possibly can manage, and move it along. So I think, we have got projects that haven't been passed around, that we've been working carefully, maybe too slowly for some people's likings, but that's been the market over the last 10, 15 years. But now that we can pick up and move these things along, and we know within our project portfolio where the highest odds are that we have something that is mineable at the end of the day, and that is where our focus can be. We're not greenfield anymore. We're advancing. We have advanced exploration projects that are well understood, that we can now start expanding on to determine whether there is something there of true value, and that will last longer than a press release or a bump in a uranium price or what have you. So as long as right now we're moving with the tide, our boat is floating with everybody else's. I think over the coming year, you're going to see that we're going to be able to put out results that are far more meaningful, far more long-lived than a lot of our peers.
Well, I think that's important. I mean, the companies got to base themselves on fundamentals, not storytelling. Well, to a large degree, I think that's true. So if I look at Hook Lake and Smart Lake, it's kind of business as usual. You're moving along with your partners at the pace which I guess they determine. What happens if they do jump away and say, well, actually, we don't have the budget for it, or we want to step away from this? What happens next? You're going to need someone else's balance sheet and someone else to come in and pay for your...
We have to make sure that that's not a company killer.
Right. Well, that's a great point. So how do you do that?
Well, we've done it in a number of ways in terms of our agreement with them. We are not beholden to them in a business sense. We can move on. We could sell that asset to someone with a longer term perspective than we have. I mean, to be honest, if they decide to park it for a while, that doesn't do us or our investors a whole lot of good, because we need more near-term results, and we have a portfolio that can deliver those near-term results. That's not the case right now. I mean, in terms of their intention, we're certainly moving those projects along, and we'll continue to. But to your point, we will be paced to a degree. And right now, we certainly haven't been, there's nothing that would lead us to believe that they want to abandon those projects. That's not the situation at all. They just move at a different pace than we do. And that gives us an opportunity during this time to really start to develop our other projects. That gives us that makes sure that one event is not going to take us off the map. So,
but given that they are the majority shareholders here, I mean, surely you've only got one buyer there. In which case, and if they don't want to move on it, not much you can do. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to move on it. I don't want to buy your shares off. It does. I know you use the phrase "company killer."
Not the shares. We could sell the project if we wanted to.
You could. Who to? Surely it's going
to
be them.
We don't want to. We have no plans to do that.
No, I know that. I understand that.
Playing hypothetical.
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
Then absolutely. There's. I mean, again, I go back to the fact that we're an explorer. We have more near-term expectations from our investors. That's why they invest in us, and instead of somebody else. So if this project doesn't serve our investors, we have to make sure that it doesn't kill the.
Yeah, and I guess you'd want to get cash for whatever sale. If it were, like, we're all hypothetical here. Let's make clear here, everyone. Hypothetical situation is you'd want cash. You can't afford to just take stock or shares in some other company which you get a hold for a while.
But I mean, I can tell you there are developers. There's people with longer term perspectives and milestones than we're allowed to have that wouldn't mind waiting 5 years or 10 years if that was the case.
Okay, let's get back onto a slightly less hypothetical situation.
Now you got me selling off Hook Lake.
I know, right? Just don't do it. Don't do it. It's too good. It's too big. Okay, but with regards to developing your own the rest of the portfolio, talk to me about money. What have you got today? What's the plan for this year in terms of spend? Are you going to need to raise some cash?
Well, we had expected to raise, to do a larger raise at the end of last year. But as things started to drop off, it really didn't make sense for us. Because we've got over $4 million in the bank. We've got lots of money to do what we want to do. We certainly expect the markets to pick back up this year and get a little more stable. And so we will, we hope to do a larger raise this year as well to maintain the momentum we've got. We certainly have adequate funds to get us through the year, but hopefully this would be the year to do a much larger raise and set ourselves up for a longer term perspective.
Well, we seem to be heading into a storm for uranium, a good one. So let's see how quickly that manifests itself. Chris, great to catch up with you. I'm intrigued by the money raise and the timing of that, and I suspect that's going to be you trying to wait to see what happens with Sput, what happens with Kazakhstan, what happens with all the other catalysts that people are talking about on the Twitter sphere. We'll see you soon, and perhaps maybe you come back on the show and get a little bit technical with one of our analysts on the drill side of things, certainly with regards to Red Willow and what you're up to there.
We can do that for sure.
Beautiful.
Great.
Okay, so well, thanks. Good to see you. Happy New Year, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Matt. Same to you. Be safe. Be well. Take care.